I always thought breakups were supposed to be clean. Painful, sure, but once it was over, it was over. I never imagined that ending a relationship could mean running for my life. It started with small things. A text here, a voicemail there. At first, they were normal, things like, "I just want to talk," or "I think we should get closure." But I didn't want to talk. We had been together for 2 years, and when I finally ended it, I meant it. His name was Mark. He wasn't a bad guy at first. He was charming, attentive, maybe too much so. Over time, he had become controlling, possessive, always wanting to know where I was and who I was with. It had started subtly. He'd check my phone when I wasn't looking, ask why I didn't answer his calls right away. But then it got worse. He started showing up unannounced at my work, at my apartment, even when I was out with friends. If I didn't answer a text, he'd send 10 more. If I ignored a call, he'd leave a voicemail every hour until I responded. By the time I ended it, I was already afraid of him. For weeks after the breakup, he kept trying to contact me. When I blocked his number, he used a different one. When I stopped responding completely, he started finding excuses to be near me. I'd see him at the grocery store, even though he lived across town. He'd be waiting outside my gym when I left, pretending it was just a coincidence. I told myself I was being paranoid, that he'd eventually give up. Then I found the Polaroids. It was a Wednesday morning when I stepped outside my apartment to leave for work. Sitting on the hood of my car was a small, white envelope. No name, no return address. Just sitting there like it had been left for me. I felt a chill as I picked it up. My fingers trembled as I pulled out the stack of photos inside. They were pictures of me, walking to work, sitting in a cafe, sleeping in my bed. My heart stopped. The last picture made me sick. It was of me in my bathroom, brushing my teeth. That picture could have only been taken from inside my apartment. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in gasps. My hand shook so badly I dropped the envelope. The photos spilled onto the pavement, the glossy surfaces catching the morning light. Mark had been inside my home. I ran back inside and locked the door. My skin crawled as I checked every closet, every locked window. Nothing was broken. No signs of forced entry. How had he gotten in? Then I saw it. The air vent above my bed was slightly ajar. I grabbed a chair and climbed up, pulling the vent cover completely off. Inside, nestled in the dust and darkness, was a tiny, hidden camera. My stomach twisted. My hands felt numb. I ripped it out and threw it across the room. I didn't go to work that day. Instead, I went straight to the police, photos in hand, heart still racing. The officer listened patiently as I explained everything, how my ex had been following me, how he had somehow gotten into my apartment, how he had been watching me. Then he sighed. "You don't have any proof that it was him." I stared at him, disbelieving. "You think someone else broke into my apartment just to take pictures of me? We can file a report," he said, "but unless he actually hurts you or breaks the law, there's not much we can do." That was the moment I realized I was on my own. I changed the locks that night, moved out a week later, got a new phone number, deleted all my social media. I did everything I could to disappear. For a while, it worked. Until the white envelopes started showing up again. No return address. No messages. Just pictures of me, in my new apartment, in my new city. Mark had found me. I barely slept. Every sound in the night made my skin crawl. I kept a knife under my pillow, a chair against the door, but nothing made me feel safe. Then, one night, I woke up to the sound of whispers. Not outside. Not in the hallway. Inside my apartment. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The whispering was soft, close, like someone was speaking just under their breath. My body locked up in pure terror. I turned my head ever so slowly toward the closet. The door was open an inch. I knew I had closed it before bed. Something shifted inside. A soft creak, like someone trying not to make a sound. My heart slammed against my ribs. I knew if I waited too long, if I pretended to be asleep, it would be too late. I threw myself out of bed and sprinted for the front door. Something moved behind me. I could hear it, fast footsteps, heavy breathing. I yanked the door open and ran into the hallway, screaming. I pounded on my neighbor's door, and by the time he answered, half asleep and confused, I was sobbing. We called the police. They found nothing inside my apartment. No signs of forced entry. No footprints. But there was one thing. The chair I had wedged against my door? It had been moved. The police searched the apartment again. Then one of them called me over. In the closet, behind a row of hanging clothes, they found a small, square cutout in the wall. A hole just big enough for someone to crawl through. It led to a maintenance tunnel. It led to every apartment in the building. I moved out that night. I never went back. I don't know if Mark was ever arrested. I never saw him again, but sometimes I wonder. Because every now and then, when I'm walking alone, I feel it. That suffocating feeling. Like someone is watching. Like someone is waiting. And sometimes, I still wake up in the middle of the night, listening, wondering if I'll hear the whispering again. I was 9 years old when my mother met Tom. She had been alone for a long time, working long shifts to keep us afloat. My dad had left when I was a baby, so it had always been just the two of us. And even though we didn't have much, we were happy, or at least, we were before Tom came into our lives. At first, he was perfect. He brought my mom flowers, took us out for dinner, bought me little gifts, cheap things like candy and comic books. But they meant something at the time. I remember thinking, maybe this is what having a dad is like. But people like Tom don't stay perfect for long. The first red flag was how fast everything moved. Within 3 months, he had moved in. By the fourth, he was talking about marriage. He had a way of making everything seem like it was meant to be, like my mother would be crazy to question him. But I noticed things she didn't. The way his smile never quite reached his eyes. How he watched me sometimes, not with kindness, but with something calculating. Then, the drinking started. It was slow at first. A beer with dinner, a whiskey before bed. But then, one turned into three, and three turned into a whole bottle. And when Tom drank, he became someone else entirely. The first time he hit my mother, I didn't see it happen, but I saw the bruise the next morning. She had tried to cover it with makeup, but I noticed the swelling, the way she winced when she turned her head too quickly. I fell, she said when she caught me staring. I was only a child, but even then, I knew she was lying. The second time, I saw everything. They were fighting in the kitchen, voices rising like a thunderstorm. My mom never yelled, but that night, she did. "Where's the rent money, Tom?" Tom was standing there, swaying slightly, his fingers clenched around the neck of a bottle. His face was red, his breath thick with alcohol. "I told you," he slurred. "I'll get it back. Just shut up about it already." "No," my mom snapped. "You gambled it away, didn't you? Jesus, Tom, we're gonna get kicked out because of you." That's when his hand flew out. A sharp, cracking sound filled the kitchen as he struck her across the face. She stumbled, knocking a plate off the counter as she fell. I ran to her, sobbing. Tom just stared down at us, breathing heavily. Then he turned and walked out the door like nothing had happened. That should have been the moment we left, but we didn't. Tom had a way of getting inside my mother's head. The next morning, he showed up with flowers, tears in his eyes, swearing he'd never do it again. It was the alcohol, baby. You know I love you. And just like that, he was back in our home. Except now, everything was worse. The drinking got heavier. The fights got louder. And the worst part? Tom didn't just hurt my mom. He enjoyed scaring me. At night, I'd wake up to the sound of my door creaking open. I'd hear his breathing before I saw him, deep, slow, deliberate. "I know you're awake, kid," he'd whisper from the darkness. I would squeeze my eyes shut, willing myself to disappear. He never touched me, but the fear was always there. Then, one night, everything changed. I woke up to my mom shaking me awake, her voice urgent, desperate. "We're leaving," she whispered. "Now, be quiet." My heart leapt. I had dreamed of this moment for months. She had been saving money in secret, just enough for a motel and a bus ticket. Tom was supposed to be at the bar until sunrise. It was our only chance. I grabbed my backpack, stuffing it with clothes as fast as I could. My mom clutched her purse tightly, filled with cash. We crept toward the front door, silent as ghosts. Then, just as my mother reached for the doorknob, the sound of keys jingling outside. My mom went stiff. No, he should still be at the bar," she whispered. We heard the keys slide into the lock. My mom acted fast. She grabbed my wrist and yanked me toward the back door. But before we could reach it, the front door slammed open. Tom was standing there, swaying, his face twisted with drunken rage. His bloodshot eyes darted between our bags, my mother's pale face, and my trembling hands gripping my backpack. His lips curled into a sneer. "Going somewhere?" My mom moved in front of me. "Move, Tom," she said, her voice shaking. He took a step forward, blocking the door. "You think you can just leave me? You think I'll let you take my kid away from me?" My stomach twisted. I wasn't his kid. He had never been my dad. "I'm not doing this anymore, Tom," my mother whispered. His face darkened. Then he lunged. I don't remember everything. It was a blur of screaming, fists, the sound of something shattering. I remember him grabbing my mom by the throat, slamming her against the wall. I remember her gasping for air, clawing at his arms. I was too small to stop him, too weak. So I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the bottle of vodka he had left on the table and smashed it over his head. Glass exploded everywhere. Tom let out a deep, inhuman sound and stumbled back, clutching his head. My mom collapsed to the floor, gasping. I grabbed her hand. Run! We bolted out of the house, barefoot, bleeding. We ran until my legs burned, until my mother collapsed onto the pavement, sobbing. A neighbor found us and called the police. Tom was arrested that night. They told us later that when the officers arrived, they found him sitting on the floor, still clutching a shard of broken glass in his hands, smiling, like he was reliving it all over again. We moved far away after that, changed our names, started over. But some nights, I still wake up gasping for air, just like my mom did that night. And sometimes, when I pass by a bar, I swear I can still hear his voice, whispering from the dark, going somewhere. I used to think of myself as a good judge of character. I wasn't the type to ignore red flags or fall for obvious manipulation. But looking back, I realized that some people are just really good at pretending to be normal. I met Kyle at work. He was friendly, easy to talk to, the kind of guy who made everyone laugh. I liked him, but not in a romantic way, not at first. He, on the other hand, made it clear from the beginning that he was interested in me. He asked me out 3 times before I finally said yes. Not because I was head over heels for him, but because he was persistent, and I figured why not give it a shot? At first, things were good. He was sweet, thoughtful, always going out of his way to do little things for me. If I mentioned craving a certain type of coffee, he'd surprise me with it the next morning. If I had a bad day, he'd show up with my favorite snacks and a comforting smile. It felt nice. But over time, the thoughtful gestures started to feel less like kindness and more like control. If I didn't answer his texts fast enough, I'd get messages like, "Did I do something wrong?" Or, "I just don't understand why you're ignoring me." If I made plans without him, he'd show up anyway, claiming it was just a coincidence. At first, I brushed it off. He just cares about me, right? Then he started making little comments about my clothes, my friends, my routine. "You always wear those jeans. I like the dress you wore last week better. I don't think Sarah really likes you. She talks about you behind your back, you know. Do you really need to go to the gym? You look fine to me." It was subtle, but effective. He was working his way into my thoughts, making me doubt myself, depend on him. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. I had been slowly isolated, pushed away from my friends, my family. He was my entire world, and that was exactly what he wanted. Then, the first time we had a real fight, I saw what was hiding beneath the charm. It was over something small. I honestly don't even remember what. But suddenly, he was a different person. His voice got low and cold. His jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. "You don't appreciate anything I do for you," he said. "Kyle, that's not fair." "No, you know what's not fair? Me giving everything to someone who doesn't even care." It was the first time I was scared of him. The second time, I wasn't just scared, I was terrified. We had been arguing in his apartment. I was getting my things, ready to leave, when he grabbed my wrist, hard. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed. I tried to pull away. His grip tightened. I saw something in his eyes then. Something dark. I knew if I didn't get out of there, I wouldn't like what happened next. I shoved him as hard as I could, breaking free just long enough to run out the door. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. The next morning, I woke up to a dozen missed calls. My phone buzzed again, Kyle's name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call, and another. Then the text started. "I'm sorry. Please talk to me. I messed up, okay? Just let me explain. You're not answering. Are you with someone else?" By the end of the day, I had over 50 messages. I blocked his number. That night, I woke up to a notification. Unknown number. Blocking me won't make me go away. My entire body went cold. The next day, I found out he had been showing up at my job, waiting outside my apartment, talking to my neighbors. When I went outside that evening, I saw something taped to my car window. A photo of me, taken from a distance. I filed a restraining order, told my friends, changed my routines. For a while, things were quiet. Then, 3 weeks later, I got home from work and found my front door unlocked. I knew I had locked it. I hesitated before stepping inside, my heart hammering. The apartment felt off, like someone had been there. Everything was in place, except for one thing. A single red rose lay on my pillow. I ran. I went straight to my best friend's house, shaking as I told her what had happened. We called the police, but by the time they got there was no sign of forced entry. Nothing missing. No fingerprints. No proof he had been there at all. But I knew. After that, I packed my things and moved across the city. New apartment, new number, new everything. I cut contact with anyone connected to Kyle. I thought I was free. Until last week. I was out running errands, my first real relaxed day in months. The sun was shining. I actually felt safe. Then I saw him. Not up close. Not in my face. Just standing across the street. He wasn't moving. Just watching. I told myself it was a coincidence. That it wasn't him. That I was just being paranoid. Then, that night, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A single message. Nice place. I like the windows. I haven't slept since. Because every time I close my eyes, I think about that rose on my pillow. And I wonder, how long was he inside before I got home? I should have seen the signs. Everyone always says that in hindsight, but I mean it. There were so many warnings, so many moments where my gut screamed at me to run, and I ignored them all. Her name was Erica. She was the kind of girl who could walk into a room and own it without even trying. People were naturally drawn to her. Her laugh was infectious, her confidence effortless. She had this way of making you feel special, like you were the only person in the world when she was talking to you. And when she set her sights on me, I felt lucky. We met during my sophomore year of college. I had seen her around campus before, always surrounded by people, always the center of attention. I never thought she'd notice me. Just an average guy trying to get through school, balancing classes and a part-time job. But one night, she did. I was at a party, wedged in a too-small living room with people I barely knew, trying to make conversation over the thudding bass of bad EDM music. Then, out of nowhere, she appeared beside me, flashing me that perfectly calculated smile. Hey, you're in my psych class, right? That's how it started. We talked all night, and by the time I walked her back to her dorm, I was completely hooked. She made me feel like I was chosen, like out of all the people she could have talked to, she had picked me. It was intoxicating. We started dating almost immediately. For the first few months, things were perfect. She was thoughtful, always texting me good morning, showing up at my dorm with coffee, slipping notes into my notebooks when I wasn't looking. She was spontaneous, dragging me out on road trips at 2 a.m. just because she wanted to see the stars. She made my world feel bigger, more exciting. I should have realized it was all about control. Slowly, the sweet gestures became tests. If I didn't answer her texts fast enough, I'd get messages like, "Did I do something wrong? Are you mad at me? I just feel like I care more than you do." At first, I reassured her. I apologized when I didn't reply fast enough. I started keeping my phone in my hand at all times, just in case she texted. Then she started showing up unannounced. If I was at the library studying, she'd just happen to be there too. If I went to get lunch with friends, she'd suddenly appear at our table, acting surprised to see me. "Wow, what are the odds?" she'd say, laughing. But it wasn't coincidence. She knew exactly where I was. She started making little comments about my friends, planting doubts in my head. "Sarah talks behind your back, you know. I just don't think Matt really respects you." She was isolating me, turning me against the people who actually cared about me. Then, one night, she showed up at my dorm crying. "I had a fight with my roommate," she sobbed. "Can I stay here?" I let her in. She never really left after that. She started sleeping over almost every night, taking over my space, making herself at home without asking. My roommate, Matt, started sleeping at his girlfriend's place more often just to avoid the tension. "Dude, she's insane," he said one day. "You need to end this." I knew he was right. But every time I tried to pull away, Erica would find a way to pull me back in. If I told her I needed space, she'd start crying, hyperventilating, saying she couldn't breathe without me. If I didn't reply fast enough, she'd send me pictures of herself holding scissors to her wrist. "I can't live without you." I felt trapped. Then came the anger. One night, we had a stupid fight. Something about me not telling her I was going out with Matt. She was furious, her hands shaking, her face twisted with rage. Then she grabbed the lamp off my desk and smashed it against the wall. Glass exploded everywhere. I stood there stunned. She stared at the broken pieces, panting, her hands balled into fists. Then, just as quickly, she burst into tears. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I should have left." But instead, I held her. Because she was crying. Because she looked so small, so helpless. Because I had spent so long believing I was the only thing keeping her together. Then, one night, I woke up to my window sliding open. I froze. It was 3 a.m., my dorm was on the second floor, and I had locked that window before going to bed. My heart was pounding as I turned my head. And there she was, climbing into my dorm. "What the hell are you doing?" I hissed. She tilted her head, eyes glinting in the darkness. "You locked the door." Like that was a perfectly reasonable explanation. Like I wasn't supposed to lock her out. I finally ended things the next day. I told her we were done, that I couldn't do it anymore. She didn't cry this time. She just stared at me. A long, empty stare. Then she smiled. Okay. That night, I woke up to a text from Matt. "Did you give Erica a key to our room?" My stomach dropped. No, I hadn't. I texted back, "Why?" He sent me a picture. Our dorm. Completely trashed. Clothes ripped apart. My bed sliced open with a knife. And the worst part? The words, "You can't hide from me," were carved into my desk. I packed my bags that night. Filed a restraining order the next morning. Blocked her number. Blocked her on social media. For a while, things were quiet. Then, months later, I was walking home when I felt it. That familiar, prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I turned around, and there she was, standing across the street, smiling. She didn't move, didn't say anything, just watched me. That night, I woke up to my phone vibrating. Unknown number. A single message. "I miss you. I moved across the country after graduation. Changed my number. Changed everything. I haven't seen her since. But sometimes, late at night, I wake up feeling like I'm being watched. And every now and then, I get a text from an unknown number. No name. No context. Just 2 words. I'm waiting." I met Jason when I was 19 years old, young and naive enough to think that love should be intense, all-consuming, and a little bit crazy. He made me feel special, like I was the only person in the world who truly mattered to him. At first, I thought his obsession was romantic. He always wanted to be near me, always texted good morning and good night, always told me how much he loved me. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he'd say, staring at me with such devotion that I almost believed he meant it in a good way. I should have paid more attention to those words, because what he really meant was, "I won't let you leave me. Ever." The first time I saw the dark side of Jason, I brushed it off. We had been dating for about 4 months, and I had gone out for dinner with some friends. I didn't answer my phone for 2 hours. By the time I got home, there were 37 missed calls and nearly 100 text messages. At first, they were sweet. "Hey, hope you're having fun." Then they got nervous. "Are you okay? Why aren't you answering?" Then angry. "Why the hell are you ignoring me?" Then disturbing. "If you don't call me in the next 5 minutes, I swear to God, I'll do something stupid." My stomach twisted when I read that last one. I called him immediately. The second he answered, he was sobbing. "I thought something happened to you," he choked out. "I was so scared. I can't lose you." I should have ended things right then and there. But instead, I apologized. I promised I'd never ignore him like that again. I told myself he just loved me too much. That's what he wanted me to believe. After that night, he became even more controlling. He started showing up unannounced at my dorm, my job, even outside my classes. "I just wanted to surprise you," he'd say, grinning. He memorized my schedule. He learned where my friends lived. He started making little comments about the people I spent time with. "I don't think Rachel really likes you. She talks about you behind your back, you know. Matt is totally into you. I see the way he looks at you. You should stop hanging out with him." Slowly, he isolated me. I stopped texting friends back. Stopped making plans. It just wasn't worth the fights, the guilt trips, the endless interrogations. And when he finally had me exactly where he wanted me, alone, dependent, afraid to upset him, that's when things got worse. One night, we got into an argument about something stupid. I don't even remember what it was, but I remember what he did. He slammed his hand against the wall right next to my face, his whole body shaking with rage. "I do everything for you, and you still treat me like this," he shouted. I flinched. My pulse skyrocketed. That's when I saw the look in his eyes. Dark. unhinged, like he wanted to hurt me. For the first time, I truly feared him. I tried to push past him, but he grabbed my wrist so hard I gasped in pain. "You're not going anywhere," he said through clenched teeth. I had never seen him like this. And then, just as fast as it came, the anger vanished. He let go of me, backing away like he was horrified with himself. Then he started crying. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. He dropped to his knees, clutching his face. Please, please don't leave me. I don't know what I'd do without you." I stood there, shaking, every instinct telling me to run. But instead, I did the worst thing possible. I forgave him. Because he made me feel guilty. Because he made me believe that if I left him, he'd hurt himself, or worse. I stayed, and that was my biggest mistake. The next few months were a blur of fear and manipulation. He controlled everything, who I talked to, where I went, what I wore. If I didn't do exactly what he wanted, he'd go from sweet and loving to furious and threatening in seconds. Then came the breaking point. I told him I needed a break, that I just needed some space. His face went completely blank. "So, you want to break up?" "No, Jason, You think you can just leave me?" His voice was so calm, too calm. A chill ran down my spine. Then he said something that made my blood turn to ice. "I guess I'll have to show you what happens to people who betray me." I laughed nervously, hoping he was joking. But then he leaned in and whispered, "Check your car before you start it tomorrow." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went to my car, hands shaking as I knelt down to check under it. And that's when I saw it. A small, white envelope taped to the exhaust pipe. I ripped it off and opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a photo of me sleeping in my own bed. My vision blurred. Jason had been inside my house. I couldn't breathe. I ran back inside and locked the doors, my pulse hammering. I called my friend Rachel, the first person I had spoken to in weeks, and told her everything. "Pack a bag," she said. "You're staying with me." That night, I stayed at her place, but I didn't feel safe. And I was right. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A single message. "Come outside." A cold wave of terror crashed over me. I turned my head slowly toward the window, and there he was, standing on the sidewalk, staring up at me, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Rachel grabbed my arm. "We're calling the cops." He was gone by the time they arrived. But that wasn't the last time I saw him. Even after I moved, changed my number, deleted my social media, he always found a way to remind me that he wasn't really gone. Sometimes, I'd come home and find my door unlocked, even though I was certain I had locked it. Other times, I'd get texts from unknown numbers. "Miss me. I know where you are. You'll always be mine." The last message I ever got from him came a year after the breakup. I had just started feeling safe again, just started letting my guard down. Then my phone buzzed. No caller ID. A photo attachment. I hesitated before opening it. And then I saw it. A picture of my new apartment, taken from the tree line across the street. I moved the next day. I never told anyone where I went. But I still check my locks 5 times before bed. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I wonder if Jason is still out there. Watching. Waiting.